I also wish my opponent, Larry Dixon, the best in the future. I hope that he will find his experience as serving as the senator for the good people of District 27 the exciting and fulfilling thing that I found in the past 5 months. And I wouldn't give anything for my experiences as the state senator and the good people I've met. And again, I want to thank everybody and wish my opponent the best.
Alabama faithful find it hard to forget last year's upset of the year in college football, a 24-21 loss to Georgia Tech. The years passed since that gloomy day in Birmingham, and Tide fans, to say the least, are looking for revenge. Coach Bear Bryant says it shouldn't take much to get excited about playing Tech.
I know you're a lot brighter than I am, and it wouldn't take a very bright person to know that Georgia Tech beat us last year, and they think they can do it again this year, and we had any pride at all, and I'm sure we do, but we don't want that to happen.
It's not hard at all getting up for them. They fought us real tough last year, and it's going to be a battle this Saturday, too, so we're just looking forward to it.
They're a good team. They played good last year, and they just played better than we did. But as far as this year goes, everybody's been thinking about that, and I think everybody's prepared accordingly.
Georgia Tech will be a different team this year. Gone is sharpshooting quarterback Mike Kelly, the hero of last year's come-from-behind effort. But back is stellar running back Robert Levette, and a team Bryant says is much better.
I think we're better than we were last year. I'll tell you that. And expect it better than we were. I expect them to be, and we should be better too. We're not better than we were the first day last year. We ought to be beaten again.
There should be some extra incentive for Alabama this week. Coach Bryant celebrates his 69th birthday on Saturday. Alabama faithful can think of no better birthday present than a revenge win over Georgia Tech. Reporting from Tuscaloosa, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
We believe that a majority of Alabamians wanted a leadership that was old enough to understand the problems, but young enough and determined enough and able enough to solve the problems, not exploit the problems for political advantage.
The balls were flying out of the launching pad tonight. Get out your scorecard. Here we go. Bottom of the first, Bob Horner gets it started. A 3-run blast off Bob Welsh. 3-1 Braves. Top of the second, Steve Sachs with a 3-run shot of his own. It's off Phil Necro. Dodgers lead it 4-3. 5-3 to the bottom of the third. Dale Murphy, his 34th of the year, just inside the foul pole in right. 2-run shot. It's tied at 5. Bottom of the fourth, Claudell Washington gives Atlanta the lead. Deep to center field it goes. A 3-run blast, 8-5 Braves. Dusty Baker cut it to 8-6 with a homer. Then Mike Scioscia doubles down the line off Bob Walk. 2 runners score. We're tied at 8. On to the 6th, Braves leading 10-8. Steve Garvey greets Donnie Moore with a 3-run shot to deep left. Dodgers regain the lead 11-10. We're still not through. Bottom of the 10th, tied at 11. Dale Murphy singles up the middle, scoring Claudell Washington. And the Braves win a wild one, 12-11. They move back into first place in the National League West. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Majority. Of course, we have not discussed it included a 15% wage and benefits increase in addition to some other matters. We thought it was a good offer. It was.
we think substantially different from the several offers we've made in the past, but it was voted down, and that really means we'll go back to the negotiating table.
Do you think you will go back to the negotiating table? Have things been set up for a further continuation of talks?
I don't think there are any specific meetings set up at this time, but of course the next step is to go back to the table, and it's really the only way that this kind of thing can be resolved.
If the advisory committee decides to study minority opportunities in Alabama's financial institutions, it may find that business loans aren't available for minorities, according to committee member Richard Schimbaum. He says the group is aware that few employment opportunities exist for minorities. Attorney Schimbaum also says the results will probably show that housing is the only area where banks are responding. But before the group accepts the project, Director Bobby Doctor of the Civil Rights Commission's Southern Regional Office wants the committee to make sure the study will provide clear-cut results for the federal government to force banks to comply with the law if violations do exist. Alabama's litigation-ridden prison system was also nominated for possible investigation, and so were police community relations in Montgomery and the desegregation of higher education in Alabama. Attorney Schimbaum suggested the committee focus on what happens to the identity of black institutions if some predominantly black colleges merge with white schools. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The hearings began in controversy as John Ripp, a Birmingham consumer, filed a motion for the case to be thrown out. Ripp contends that $325 million of $454 million rate request is currently being considered by the Alabama Supreme Court. The PSC denied the power company request for a $325 million increase in rates in March of 1981, and the utility appealed the case to the High Court. Ripp contends that since the court has not ruled on that rate request, the PSC does not have jurisdiction to rule on the current case. Utility officials say, from a practical standpoint, the two cases are related, but legally they're separate and based on different sets of figures. Power company officials say if the PSC granted the new request and the Supreme Court ruled in the utility's favor on the last request, the net increase in rates would not exceed $454 million. PSC President Billy Joe Camp is not so sure and has asked that legal briefs be filed on the matter by Monday.
And I'm not trying to say that the utility is attempting to get a double rate increase, one from the commission and one from the court on the same data, but there is that possibility, and I do not like to operate in the realm of possibilities that could go that strongly against the consumers of this state.
Under a similar set of circumstances, the Public Service Commission threw out a rate request by Alabama Gas Corporation. A ruling on Ripp's motion is not expected until next week. In the meantime, further testimony is being taken in the case. Power company officials say if the full increase is granted, it would raise residential customers' bills by more than $8.30 per thousand kilowatt hours of electricity used. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
All right, hold on.
Reporters were not allowed in the 2-hour closed meeting of the board. When the board convened in open session, two-year college chancellor Howard Gundy recommended immediate termination of Nunnally President Mike Arbin. The board backed up that recommendation with a unanimous vote. Arbin, his family, and friends left soon after the vote was taken. Arbin recently pled guilty to violating the state ethics law in connection with the purchase of an automobile by a competitive bid. He was ordered to pay a $5,000 fine. Board members made no other comments and proceeded with other business. Board Attorney Charles Cootie was reluctant to discuss the reasons for Arbin's termination.
It's not incumbent upon the board to give Mr. Arbin a reason, nor is it incumbent upon us to give anyone else a reason, and I think that's our basic position. Certainly we can't dismiss the fact of Mr. Arbin's guilty plea, and it would be disingenuous for us to say that that did not enter into it. And I don't think any further comment on our part would be appropriate.
Board member Dr. Harold Martin asked Chancellor Gundy to take over operation of Nunnally and to begin the search for a new president immediately. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Still riding high from Tuesday's election, John McMillan walked into his crowd of County supporters. McMillan says he learned a lot of lessons 2 days ago. His first lesson, a majority of Alabamians rejected politics of the past. He says the Bob James election of 4 years ago signaled the first break with the past. He wants to build on that foundation.
I think for too long in this state that we have been held back by a political system in which the independent banker is encouraged to fight the holding company banker, in which elementary and secondary education is encouraged to fight higher education, and I could give many other illustrations. And as long as we have a political system that encourages this kind of
to use the media more to
the
get his
Ray
message
Evans
across.
poll, which
He says
to
he
me,
wants voters, especially
and
black
I'm not
voters,
putting
to
that
know
down.
the
People can do
McMillan
anything they
name
want, but
and
for
to
the
know he
news
has much
media-
in common with Joe McCorkadale on the issues.
Well, what I'm going to do about the black vote splitting is the same thing I'm going to do about the white vote splitting. Is where I think we can get it, we're going to go after it. And I think that I think if you will
WSFA
examine
TV News.
that perhaps we have a little bit of a communication problem, because George Wallace.
They put them in paper. Somebody done took it. Although the kittens
What you do to him, Missy?
Sam, did you get to hold that little cup?
"14 years ago, an investigative team of the Civil Rights Commission went to 16 rural counties stretching from Mississippi to Alabama and Georgia. Their mission was to study the discrimination of blacks who lived in those areas. Times have changed since the 1960s, and another team went to find out the living conditions for blacks who live in Macon, Autauga, Lowndes, Greene, Clark, and Sumter counties. Specifically, the committee wants to know, as compared to whites, how blacks are doing in the school system, in the jobs and employment areas, and in health care. The committee's preliminary report shows that blacks have made very little progress on the economic front. Committee members say there are few, if any, black-owned businesses and banks in those counties, but the report will show that blacks have gained substantial political power, especially in Macon and Lowndes counties. Also, the report finds basic similarities that were discovered in their first report, that regionally, blacks are still economically depressed as compared to whites, but have made improvements with the aid of federal dollars. Committee members purposely excluded voting and farming conditions for blacks in their report. The group will submit its final report by next summer. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Completed too many passes on because we didn't get the good line rush, and we're going to try to improve on our offensive line. I think we played real well in the first quarter, but after then we didn't play as well in the second quarter, and the third and fourth quarter. So we're going to try to be a little more consistent in our line play.
What will you have to do to be offense state?
I think we've got to keep down the mistakes to the minimum. And I think we're going to have to execute our techniques about 72%. We're going to have to do that because we was down about 48% on our techniques. I think we got to do that because we're going to be kind of mismatched with size a little bit, and I think the technique going to save us though. They are. They got great personnel and large, big running backs and tight ends are, you know, about 6'6" or 6'7", and that's what been hurting us. We got the mismatch there. But we think we have learned something about playing Jackson State. One thing I was proud of the Jackson and Alabama State game, the Alabama State didn't give up. And I think if we will just let down a little more, that it could be easier, 55%. So I'm proud of it, and they're going to show improvement every week, and I'm sure of that.
What's in the box?
Going from the hospital to the morgue with the dead body. So now, the chain of custody is the most important thing in the proceedings, and especially the most important case that we investigate is a homicide, and it's important that we keep the chain of evidence from becoming contaminated. So we keep the body, which is evidence, in strict police control until we release the body to the medical examiner, and which also testifies in court as to his findings as to the cause of death. And
The balls were flying out of the launching pad last night. Get out your scorecard. Here we go. Bottom of the first, Bob Horner gets it started. A 3-run blast off Bob Welsh. 3-1 Braves. Top of the second, Steve Sachs with a 3-run shot of his own. It's off-field Necro. Dodgers regain the lead, 4-3. 5-3 in the bottom of the third. Dale Murphy, his 34th of the year, just inside the foul pole in right. 2-run shot that ties it at 5. Bottom of the fourth, Claudell Washington gives Atlanta the lead. Deep to center field it goes. A 3-run blast. 8-5 Braves. Dusty Baker cut it to 8-6 with a homer. Then Mike Scioscia doubles down the line off Bob Walk. 2 runners score, tying the game at 8. In the 6th, Braves leading at 10-8. Steve Garvey greets Donnie Moore with a 3-run shot to deep left. Dodgers regain the lead 11-10, and we're still not through. Extra innings now. Bottom of the 10th, tied at 11. Dale Murphy singles up the middle off Steve Howe. That scores Claudell Washington. Braves win a wild one, 12-11. They're now back in first in the National League West, leading the Dodgers by a half game. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Well, I understand it was voted down last night by about an 82% majority. Of course, we have not discussed in public the details of the contract offer. I can say, though, that it included a 15% wage and benefits increase in addition to some other matters. We thought it was a good offer. It was, we think, substantially different from the several offers we'd made in the past, but it was voted down, and that really means we'll go back to the negotiating table.
Do you think you will go back to the negotiating table? Have things been set up for further continuation of talks?
I don't think there are any specific meetings set up at this time, but of course the next step is to go back to the table. And it's really the only way that this kind of thing can be resolved. A rate case, it's an understatement, but it's not a popular thing. It is not a popular thing for Alabama Power Company. This company was able to decrease the price of its product until 1969, when we got caught up in the same inflationary spiral and the same inflationary problems that most other people have. Alabama Power is extremely aware of the economy. There is high unemployment. The economy is very bad. Plants are closing. Businesses are having difficulties all over. We would say to the people of Alabama that we don't want to be down here at this particular time for a rate increase, asking for a rate increase any more than you want us to be, but we have no choice.
The state has been putting state inmates in county jails for years in order to prevent overcrowding in the state facilities. But the county jails are in some cases overcrowded. And the state has already missed one deadline to find somewhere else to keep those state inmates. Although the state says it will be able to absorb about 1,600 inmates into 2 new state prisons, there are 1,800 state inmates in county jails. About 600 inmates will be moved into the West Jefferson County Prison when it opens in November, and about 1,000 inmates will be put in the St. Clair County Prison when it opens in March of next year. But that leaves about 200 state inmates in the county jails, plus any increase in the prison population between now and the time that the 2 new prisons open. So Governor James is taking further action. He's activating an early discretionary release program. That program would allow some inmates to leave prison early, but stay under prison supervision. State officials say that should affect about 500 inmates. And the governor is asking the State Pardon and Parole Board to consider, and in some cases, reconsider early parole for inmates sentenced to 5 years or less and who have served at least a third of their term. The governor's office says this plan is a critical part in the state's meeting the requirements to ease overcrowding in the prisons. The state contends it has met all of the other requirements and will be in substantial compliance with the federal court order once it implements this early removal plan. There has been no reaction from federal Judge Robert Varner to this plan. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
This has been the case. If you look in the years of greatest achievements of people, when did they occur? They occur. You may have heard about the treatment of the aged by. There is no medical basis for this, absolutely none. A person at 65 is no different than he was at 64 or possibly at 66 or 63. You don't become a horse or a cow or a chicken at 65 and you were a human being at 64. Nothing happens to you overnight. We know that, doesn't it? Nothing creeps into your bedroom that night.
Come up with 5 consensus recommendations that the group could run a White House conference on each
of their adult life. Almost a quarter of their adult life in retirement. Over 13 years in retirement, which is, there is no medical basis for this, absolutely none. A person at 65 is no different than he was at 64.
Today marked the 10th time Congressman Dickinson has hit the campaign trail in hopes of being reelected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Campaigning seems to be a way of life to the senior member of the Armed Services Committee.
Yeah, that's the first day I've kissed this campaign.
But the congressman admits he'll have his work cut out for him in this election. Dickinson says a large segment of the population will be voting its pocketbook in November, and that could spell trouble for all incumbents. Dickinson says the economy and jobs will be the key issues.
The economy is not healthy yet, but the improvement is there, the change is there, and this administration offers an answer to the ills of the past. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and all you got to do is read to see that things are in fact getting better.
Dickinson told the crowd that packed his campaign headquarters that he has done and can do more for the 2nd Congressional District than his Democratic opponent. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
And that will continue. We're growing health.
As long as our friend Bob Sykes was the Congress, problems have been ignored. I said the voters of the district for their patience with us and those who voted success. The people feel like that they have not had the contact with their congressman that they should have. You know, they may get a little flyer every month or every 2 or 3 months or something like that through the mail. But coming and visiting with them on their farms and in the streets of their communities and sitting down and listening to their problems.
Several weeks ago, City Superintendent Jack Adamson says he was looking for a water meter when a bad smell led him to these barrels in a vacant lot. According to Adamson, he called in local health officials who contacted state hazardous waste officials. The barrels, some labeled paint sludge, are rusting, and some are bulging from internal pressures. At another site several hundred yards away, we talked to Ray Kelly, who told us he received the barrels about a year ago from Performance Advantage, a Weowagufka oil processing firm.
It's not supposed to be a hazardous waste at all. This is supposed to be paint. That's all. And according to what some people told me last week, it is a hazardous waste. And I don't really know what's going to happen yet. You know, they said they'd let me know, you know, what we're supposed to do with them. But right now, I don't know.
Did you give someone permission to put these on your property?
Yes, I did. As a paint, not as a hazardous waste.
A spokesman for the State Health Department, Buddy Cox, says they're still checking out Mr. Kelly's story. In the meantime, Mr. Cox says the barrels will have to be moved because they contained an as-of-yet undetermined flammable material. According to Mr. Cox, it'll cost from $1,400 to $12,000 to move the barrels, depending upon where they have to be taken. He says they're trying to find out who will have to foot the bill for the transportation. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News, Goodwater.
It's extremely important that the motives for this are well understood. That is, to enhance self-determination. We're not taking a position, none of the investigators in the field or our National Association, on whether or not parents ought to decide not to have a child, but simply to give them opportunity. We think there are very good reasons why parents will decide to have the child if they find it has sickle cell anemia. There are good reasons why other parents, on a very personal level, will decide that they didn't wish to. So this is an opportunity then to enhance self-determination.
I'm a Democrat.
What Mr. Dickens said at his campaign opening said it's going to be two issues. In one sense,
over with, we like to join together and get the family house. I do not look for an easy campaign by any means, but I do expect the campaign to be successful. I had access to some fairly good polling during the last campaign, and I'm not saying that every poll is correct. But it reflects a very, very close race. In fact, they were running some polls of myself and the incumbent, and we were just neck and neck. One day I might be a couple of points ahead, and the next day he might be. And I don't know how that would prevail today, because those indicators are marketing technique, as you know, and they're good for that particular.
I'm going to scrutinize all the polling data from this last campaign. As I say, I believe I believe that I have figured out exactly what happened. I have been accurate since 1970, consistently, and just because I miss one or two major elections, then people want to start calling me fraudulent. Well, I'll tell you one thing. You have not heard the last from Ray Evans yet. I will correctly predict the outcome of this Democratic runoff a few days before the election, and whether it's used in the press or whether it's not, it will be accurate. And in the November elections, I will accurately predict the outcome of that election, and again, whether it's used in the press or not, it will certainly be accurate, and I can promise you that.
The City of Prattville, through its attorneys today, represented to the court that they will indeed have a prosecutor hired and ready to prosecute cases the next time court meets. We have accepted that representation, but the case is still pending on several other issues relating to other requests for relief, requests for damages. We have asked that the court consider the fact that this practice might be widespread in other municipalities across the state, and it may be necessary for us to request relief that would be appropriate for other persons who are similarly situated.
Okay. The prosecutor has been in the budget beginning in October all along. We've agreed to move the hiring date up and intend to hire a prosecutor very shortly. But it was there all along. The lawsuit didn't bring about the prosecutor. It was there all along.
All right.
We plan to raise hopefully $10,000. We are funded by United Way. We educate them as to what sickle cell and how it will affect them. We educate through the physical education classes in our 20 counties. And of course then we go back and test them to see who have the trait and the disease. There have been times when we go into our schools that we test 600 students in one school during one period of testing.
Do you feel that you are making...
Oh, no, not any extra feeling. Tech, we've been making rivals a long time. I used to be real close to Bobby Dodd. Still am. Really don't get to see him much. Bobby Dodd put in the I formation for us when we first started with it. I mean, the T formation, what am I talking about?